Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 2. So, crack open your books, turn to page 43, and let's begin. The way we normally start these things, I start with the learning objectives just to make sure that we're covering all the things we're supposed to cover in the chapter. So, let's do that now. So, describe the systems view. Understand organizations and the four organizational frames. Organizational structure and culture. Explain why stakeholder management and top management commitment are critical. Understand the concepts of project phases and the system development life cycle. Discuss unique attributes and diverse nature of IT-related projects. Describe recent trends. Okay, so I tell you, one of the things we're going to talk about in this chapter is this case study that starts on page 44. So what I'd recommend you do is just pause the video, read that case study, and then when you're done, we can pick up where you left off and we're good to go, okay? So, let's do that. So, assuming that you've already paused and you've read the case study, let's begin. So, the systems view. So, the idea is you ought to look at things as a system. And you think, yeah, okay, what the heck does that mean? Well, their terms are kind of cool. A system is a set of interrelated components. Essentially what they're talking about is you can't do things in isolation. This case study is a perfect example of somebody came up with a great idea, but didn't talk to anybody else and never considered all the rest of the players involved. They missed a few stakeholders, and therefore it was done in isolation and then just sprung upon the people saying, hey, look at this cool idea we're doing. And everybody went, what? Okay. So the systems view is projects are not run in isolation, kind of makes sense. And you should look at the holistic or the systems view of things. In other words, the big picture. Always look at the big picture of how many people this is going to affect. That's the whole concept of a systems view. So the concept of system analysis, continuing on page 45, so a bunch of definitions, and let me just go through them. So systems is what we talked about, a set of interrelated things that, some sort of interrelated components that all have a common goal. And remember now, they're not done in isolation. The system philosophy. And this is basically a model of how to think about things as a system. I know it sounds kind of silly, but that's what they're talking about. System analysis. Okay, this is a problem-solving approach. System analysis is all about, I've got a problem, it's this big, and it's way too big to figure out, but I can break it into chunks. I can figure out this piece, and then figure out this piece, and then figure out this piece. So it's all chunking. So system analysis is the idea of, I need to break things into individual chunks, chew on them, and then I can bolt them all back together. Okay, cool. So breaking things down into smaller components is what that's all about. In this world of project management, it's all about those work breakdown structures. If you can figure out how to break those things into big chunks, you're on your way. And then systems management is all about creating and maintaining and modifying systems. Okay, so that's kind of silly. All right. So what's the whole point of this, systems management and the systems approach? What's the pros and cons of doing this? Well, it should be fairly obvious that it's useful for, accurately determining the needs, identifying key issues. If you're kind of have your blinders on, you may completely miss one of the requirements because it's not of interest to you and no one told you about it, or you may completely be unaware of a key issue where other people have a stake in this thing that you weren't even aware on. So the whole system approach is essentially required. Okay, you can't really do a project management without using the systems approach, whether you call it by that name or not. Okay, the next thing to talk about is the three-sphere model. Okay, and so they're looking at it from the point of view of there's a business component, a technology component, and an organizational component. Now, all the things we're going to be talking about refer back to that case study. So if you haven't read the case study, you probably need to do that. So from a business perspective, how much will this thing cost? What will the costs be for the students? What about the support cost? The technology, what choices do I have for these tablets? Are they going to be, Android tablets or Apple or Microsoft? And, what applications and what specifications and, how will it affect the network, and how many more chargers do I need in the classroom? And then from the organizational point of view is, will all the students be able to have this, or just online students are exempt? And what about people who already have stuff? And how do you do? Who's going to do the training? It's an awful lot of stuff involved in this. Anyway, so their business organization and technology piece helps you think like the systems approach. If you don't have that frame of mind of a systems approach, using this little 3-sphere model actually will help out a little bit. So let's just talk about this a bit more. Let's say you're the IT guy that came up with this great idea of using tablets for students. Okay. You're probably going to be a bit frustrated with like the people aspect of this and the politics involved. It's like, oh man, I got to deal with the politics. Can't they just leave me alone and let me play with my toys? Yeah, that's kind of sort of the problem. Is that in order for a project to succeed, you can't just play with the toys. You do need to have that human part to it. And a lot of people get completely intoxicated with the idea of the new technology. I remember, for example, and here's a real life scenario. We were using Microsoft Office, and I don't remember what version, so I'm just going to make this up. We were, using Microsoft Office 12, okay? And so the guy came running in the room saying, "Hey, we need to upgrade to version 13." And the business guy said, "Well, why do we need to do that?" He says, "Well, because it's new." It's like, well, is it going to provide me any better performance? Is it my workers are going to be, working more efficiently? And the guy says, "Well, no, because it's new." And he just kept on. That was the only thing he could say was, "It's new. It's new." Well, I'm sorry, it's new is not a valid business need. You may have a technological requirement for something, but there has to be a valid business need to go with it. If you can't show the businessman that there's any value in upgrading, it's just going to be, well, this is just a cost. I mean, why should I upgrade my version of Office to the latest and greatest version if all it's going to do is just cost me? See what I'm getting at? Okay. So don't get intoxicated with the new technology and think that everything that's new we must include it because it's new. Hey, I read something in a magazine about this new thing called, blockchain. We got to include that in our project. That is not the way to do a project. Okay. Okay, you guys watch the TV show Scorpion? Okay, well, the Paige character is what we're talking about. We need somebody who has the human aspect. You can't have just a room of geniuses working on a project. You need people with people skills in there too. The soft skills that be able to help you, guide you along the way to make sure you don't trip up. Okay. So, the whole point of all this is that project management can help with this. If you think about project management from the holistic point of view, the systems point of view, and you lay out these things, you will be forced to come in contact with, why am I doing this? What's the business need? What are all the human aspects of it? All those things that you may not have thought about, that using, project management is going to help you. Okay. So the next thing to talk about is the human aspect. Page 47, they talk about organizations. So understanding an organization. So often the most complex part of a project is how it fits into the organization. Most of the time, the technology piece isn't all that tough. Over here, coming up with the technology, you can kind of sit around and war game this and come up with this. But this is going to mean, for example, who's going to train the faculty and staff? I'm the developer. I don't have a clue the answer to that question. I might have to go find out. Well, here I probably have all the skills I need to be able to answer all these questions. But on an organizational side, I don't know. Are we going to contract that out? I mean, are we going to have a roving team of people running around? Are we going to have a classroom? How are we going to do this? There's a lot of unanswered questions. Okay. Anyway, the number one source of failure is, this whole organizational part. Particularly, if you ignore or underestimate the people who are opposed to the project. Let me give you another one of those crazy war stories. Okay, so here's the crazy war story. Here's a scenario where we have a roving salesman who run off, travel a great deal. And they have an expense account where they can charge off, hotel and even, drinks at restaurants and stuff if they're wining and dining a client, okay? And so they come back from their trip and they turn in, a travel voucher to get reimbursed for the costs that they incurred during this trip. And there was one person in the organization who approved all the travel requests. And she was kind of like a bottleneck. There was a stack of, travel requests. And, if you're a beginning salesman, you kind of sort of need to get your money reimbursed in a hurry because that's going to kind of hurt your wallet. So this person who did the travel vouchers was a very important person who, you would bring her donuts and to make sure your request kind of went to the top. You see what I'm saying? Okay, good. So then they proposed a new system where we, instead of having the salesman turn their things into this one person, they turn it into their supervisor, and their supervisor approves their travel expenses. That was the proposal. So you got hired on to put this system in place, okay? The problem is the person who has the most information about how this thing works, that one person, is going to lose all of her perceived power, okay? She was a very, very powerful person. No one messed with this person. No one pissed this person off, because if you did, you would never get paid, okay? That person is not going to be for this new system that you're doing, because they're basically going to take that person out of the chain, and the supervisors are going to take care of it. So this person's going to lose all stature. Got it? Okay. That person is not going to want to cooperate. You're going to walk up and say, well, about how many of these do you get in a week? She's going to say, go away, leave me alone. I ain't got time for that. Right? They're not going to be cooperative. Okay? So these organizational things are extraordinarily important, particularly if you have somebody who is opposed to the system. Okay. Whew. Let's keep it going. So they talk about the 4 frames. The frames of an organization. There's a structural frame, and human resources, and politics, and symbolic. Okay, so we're going to go through those. So the structural frame is basically like the organizational chart. And if you ever taken, business classes, which I assume some of you guys have, you have the tall and narrow organizational chart, or you have the flat and squatty ones. How many levels of supervision is there between, you and the top person at the organization. Some organizations like tight structures. Some people like really lean structures where their structure is kind of flat and squatty, and they have fewer supervisors. So some organizations kind of gravitate towards like a centralized approval process. If you're going to get supplies, you have to go to this one organization rather than having it distributed among, having authority being very tightly held at the top versus delegating, right? Okay. So whether or not you're decentralized or centralized is a good indicator of how successful a project could probably be, right? Because, if you have a really, really tight organizational control and things are not normally decentralized because that's not the culture, then proposing a project to provide supervisors with authority to approve travel reimbursement, you're going to have some resistance. Okay. And so another thing about the structural is maybe you have a history of contracting out those things that are not core to your business. And so if you have a history of that, where you just take chunks of your organization and have that mission being contracted out versus not, that would make an awful lot of difference, particularly if some sort of third-party contracting is part of your scheme. Okay, so we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, and we'll pick this thing up again in just a few.